This is The Journey, podcast edition. If what you're building didn't come with a playbook, you're in the right place.
Welcome back to The Journey. Today we're tuning into the pulse of customer insight, or how to build what I call a scalable feedback engine and do it from scratch, even as your business grows and time gets tight. Let's start with the truth. Good businesses talk to their customers. Great businesses listen. Exceptional ones build operations around customer needs. And that doesn't happen by accident. There's a concept that I like to call the paradox of success, which is particularly relevant here. I'm not going to belabor this too much. If you really want to read kind of a deep dive on the background, go to the Medium post I wrote about this. The link is in the show notes. But anyway, the paradox of success. As a company grows, it naturally gets busier. Founders, execs, early employees, they get busy as you find your stride. More customers, more staff, more pressure. Ironically, it's right at this moment of success that businesses start ignoring the very thing that got them there in the first place, the customer. And that's what I call the paradox of success. You start out really listening to your customer, trying to figure out what's going to work, what hits. You find it, do it, you stop listening to the customer because you're busy. So the act of growing, it pulls your focus away from what made you successful in the first place, which is listening. If you want to avoid becoming the next brand that customers fall out of love with, you need a system. And that's why I developed this scalable feedback engine system. It's what it's really meant to address. So what is it? What is the scalable feedback engine? Really, at the kind of brass tacks, it's the deliberate combination of three things: a tool stack used for research, processes used for activities, and people used for, well, their brains and their intuition, and everything that makes people good at things that machines aren't. So these three elements, they form the basis for a repeatable insight-generating machine that makes the customer's voice almost impossible to ignore inside your organization as the system really takes root. Let's break that down. There are some layers. The first layer is the internal champion. You need a person whose job it is, their purpose, is to connect the dots between research and action. Someone who can act as a bridge. This person, they'll take the insights that they generate from the research, they'll make sure that they reach the right people inside your organization and out who can use them. That's your internal champion. Without them, the engine really, it doesn't fire on all cylinders. It doesn't perform to its full potential. Second layer is the surveying layer. This is how you ask your customers for feedback, how you collect that feedback. It can be as simple as, using a Google form or a Microsoft form, or it can be as sophisticated as self-hosting some pretty advanced software on your own infrastructure if you want to. I find that most of the time, kind of a balance in the middle, a cloud-based managed solution is fine for most businesses. That's kind of your surveying layer. The third layer is the data aggregation layer. You're going to need tools to store, to organize, and analyze the data. So this could be spreadsheets at first, could be something more advanced like Looker Studio or Power BI. With the data aggregation layer, start small, keep it simple. And then as you grow, add more complexity only where you need it. Layer 4, it's the insights layer. So with this one, insights, they come from brains, human brains, but humans often need help communicating their insights, their ideas. And that's where the insights layer comes in. So we're talking here, stuff like PowerPoint decks, Google Slides, dashboards, or if you're in an in-person office environment and you're kind of a doodler, use a whiteboard. There's nothing wrong with that. The fifth layer is the communications layer. And this kind of ties everything together. You need to be able to reach out to your customers. So, that's email, text, SMS, RCS, whatever, WhatsApp. The places where you communicate with your customers already. You can kind of like piggyback on the existing marketing infrastructure that you might have for this. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. There are great tools out there that can help with this. Managed EDM platforms like Brevo, MailChimp, Klaviyo, they're all really solid picks. You just want to make sure that you get permission and you respect privacy laws the same way that you would if these were marketing messages. Nothing makes, people more pissed off in today's day and age than getting spam, getting unsolicited messages that they didn't ask for, they don't know what they're about, etc., etc. So treat this as a permissions-based journey, just like you would with marketing. So let's tie all of that together with an example. Imagine you have someone named Sylvie as your champion. Sylvie is a great critical thinker, wonderful soft skills, sharp, and she is intellectually curious. She uses Brevo to send out an email campaign that links to a Google Form survey. Customers fill it out for a chance to win a widget, or whatever it is that you make. She analyzes those responses in Google Sheets, builds a deck with Google Sheets, maybe Looker, maybe PowerPoint, and then shares it out on Slack or Teams and kind of polls people, has little informal conversations. Maybe she sets up a meeting to review and talk about some of the more interesting findings with the right people. She's not just collecting data in this example. Sylvie is going the extra step and she's activating it. She's taking that data, making it a usable thing. That's the key to the engine. Without that, it's just a collection of stuff that nobody uses or looks at. Some tips on your tool stack. A few things to keep in mind from experience. Choose a tool or set of tools that integrate well with each other. You're probably going to have to use a few different tools to make this work really well. You can save yourself a lot of hassle if you choose tools that have integrations with the other tools you're going to use. You can also use automation platforms like Zapier, Make, even if this, then that, if you want, to move data between the different tools you're using. At the start, favor simplicity and cost efficiency. Always. Don't get ahead of yourself. But at the same time, don't lock yourself into a pathway that's rigid, that you can't break out of if you need to. You also want to avoid tools that lock you into high costs as you grow. And I find that SaaS companies, SaaS tools, platforms, part of their business model is being exceptional at lock-in. Be wary of that and avoid it. Now, what about asking questions? How do you ask the right questions? What should you actually ask your customers? So, like everything, it depends. And I know so many people who hate it when I say it depends, but it's true. I find with service-oriented businesses, especially ones that have brick and mortar locations that depend on serving people in person, you want to focus your questions around customer experience and brand perception. An easy way to start out is by tracking Net Promoter Score. And, the basics of a Net Promoter Score is how likely are you to recommend us to friends or colleagues? That's kind of the basis of it. I talk a little bit more about Net Promoter Score in the companion post to this pod. So hit the show notes, go there if you want to learn a little bit more. Customer Satisfaction Score, or CSAT. This one really boils down to the question, how likely are you to buy from us again? And you're going to ask questions that are, more varied than that. There's going to be more than one question in a good CSAT survey, but essentially that's kind of the root of what you're trying to get at. Now, for product-driven businesses, there are often opportunities to use engagement with customers as product development, product research. So there's a framework that I developed called Product Satisfaction, or PSAT, which is like CSAT, but more geared towards products. Examples of things you'd want to ask about for, a product-driven business, poll your customers about. Product expectations, did we hit the mark? Actual experience, was your experience with this product similar to what you expected? How do we stack up? Use cases, how are you actually using this product? Maybe customers are using your product in an unconventional way, something that you hadn't thought of, that in turn could spin off new ideas. And that is the basis for innovation, right? You can also take the opportunity to ask customers about their needs. You know, the best thing about running a product-based business is that when you find an unmet need in your customer base, it's like you just hit it, sparks fly, and you can develop something that fits that need, and you already have a customer base, a market built in. It's fantastic. So you want to find out what those unmet needs are so you can build something for them. In all cases, no matter what you're asking, who you're talking to, be very, very careful to avoid biased phrasing in your questions. You want to avoid introducing bias. Keep your questions neutral, keep them clear. Now, how do we take this from research stack to scalable feedback engine? How do we close the loop? Having tools is great, but they only really become an engine when the insights are shared, when the right people, the stakeholders, actually see the insights and get the benefit of the data. Someone owns the process, and you have a repeatable rhythm of communication. Those kind of 4 things are really important to take it from tools to engine. So getting to the engine part, your champion really drives that process. This might mean face-to-face meetings, dashboards, or asynchronous updates. It really depends on your business. But whatever you do, however you design the process part of your engine, it must be intentional. Designed for an outcome. That's really another part of what your champion is going to be all about. They're going to adapt the internal process and make sure that the feedback loop stays alive. Here are some final thoughts. A scalable feedback engine is more than a stack of tools. It's a living system. It requires design. It requires process. And it requires someone who cares. Ideally, an entire organization of people who care. But you need one person that cares the most. It's their purpose. It's their being to drive this forward. And really, you want to build this before you think you need it. And that's really important. Really, really important. Because by the time you know that you need it, you've already lost touch with some of your earliest, most passionate customers. And you're already kind of well down the road of your business detaching from what made it successful in the first place, listening. So build this as early as you can. And that's it for this podcast episode. Check out the link in the show notes for our companion post with the tools and downloads. In there, you'll also find some links to live example surveys that I put up on the 6 Catalysts website. So check that out. I mentioned that there's a kind of a philosophical post about the paradox of success that I put on Medium. If you're interested, go and read that. And if you want to learn a little bit more about how to actually run NPS and CSAT, check out the companion post to this episode on Substack. I got a couple of examples there that go into a bit more detail than I talked about during the pod.
And that's it for this episode of the Journey Podcast Edition. If you're building something from scratch or scaling something messy, make sure to follow, share, or just send this to someone else in the trenches. Until next time, keep climbing.